Hello everyone and welcome to another incredible game from round 4 of this year's FIDE Grand Swiss. It is a most interesting matchup. Grandmaster Dr. Bassem Amin takes on Divya Deshmukh, also a Grandmaster, and Divya is one of the two women competing in the open section, the other one being Alexandra Goryachkina. So it is a very interesting matchup, and I don't know if you guys noticed, Bassem Amin also finished medicine, so he's a trained physician. I don't know if he actually works as a medical doctor, but if he wants, he always can. And he's a former 2700, 7 times African champion, so he is an amazing player. Divya, on the other hand, we've covered her games many times. She's a world youth champion, world junior champion in the women's section. She also won this year's FIDE Women's World Cup. She won Tata Steel Rapid in 2023, so in the women's section. So yeah, definitely a very, very strong player, and the game is incredible, and especially since the most critical moment happens on move 40, just before reaching time control with 1 minute on the clock. So let's check it out. Bassem with white opens with pawn to e4. We have pawn to c5. Divya goes for the Sicilian defense. Knight f3, knight to c6, and Bassem strikes with bishop to b5. This is the Nyezhmetdinov attack or the Rossolimo attack. Pawn to e5, not the most common move. I think it's maybe 5th or 6th most common. But of course, at this level, you have to know everything. And the idea is that, like in the Ruy Lopez, you can't really win the e5 pawn. If captures, then queen d4 attacks the knight and the e4 pawn. And black already at least equalized, and is probably even better. So after e5, we have pawn to c3, preparing that pawn to d4. We have pawn to a6 and bishop to a4. Divya grabs more space on the queen side, b5, bishop to c2, knight to f6, and castles kingside. We have bishop to e7, and finally pawn to d4. So all pretty standard for a Sicilian. And there are some games where d captures and c4 was played. Divya goes pawn to d6, and it is now as of move 8 that we have a completely new game. Okay, you could do a lot of things here, but grabbing more space with the d5 definitely makes sense here. Divya goes to a5 with the knight and pawn to b3, stopping knight c4. And okay, you have weakened some of the squares in the center, but you also gain control of c6 and e6. So it is very good for white. We have castles kingside, pawn to h3, stopping any bishop to g4 action. We have bishop to d7 and bishop to e3. We have knight to e8, now preparing pawn to f5, as you really have no other way of making progress, and knight b to d2. We have knight b7, and now pawn to b4, making sure that the knight remains on b7, as that knight on b7 is not a great piece. You can't go to a5 to c5 to d6, so it doesn't really do all that much. And especially if you close the position with c4, then the knight will just be stranded there for a very long time. So, okay, Divya says, if it's a bad knight, let's at least open up the c file so we can use it for the rook. C captures, we have c captures, pawn to g6, now further preparation for pawn to f5, and pawn to a4. Okay, everything makes sense here. We have pawn to f5, and now e captures on f5, where you have two options. You could capture with the pawn, or you could capture with the bishop. Capturing with the bishop can be played, but it's not great. If bishop captures, you don't really mess up your pawn structure, but then bishop b3, and you don't really have a game plan here. With the g captures, on the other hand, it is... you get a lot more play. You can play king to h8, you can play rook to g8, get the queen into the game, create some sort of an attack. You have the strong center, you control all of these squares, so capturing with the g pawn is better. And here we have pawn to a5. It's a very interesting decision by Bassem, closing up the queen side when, I guess, capturing and then, using the a file, going after the b pawn. Is something that would give him a lot of play. But I guess he decided that, okay, now the black king is opened up, let's attack it. So he plays pawn to a5, and okay, bishop f6, threatening e4 to put some pressure on that rook on a1, so rook to a3, and king to h8. Now Divya says, all right, the g file is semi-open, we're going to use it to attack the white king. Rook to e1, we have knight to g7 and knight to f1. Rook to c8, grabbing hold of the only open file on the board. Knight to g3. And here, the idea behind knight to g3 is that, of course, if f4, which is the first move that comes to mind, you have bishop to b6. You attack the queen, and then the queen moves, and then you go knight e4. And okay, it's still even okay for black. You can go queen g6, and the game continues with some threats of bishop captures on h3. But Divya says, all right, let's prepare that. Queen to e8. Now I'm really threatening pawn to f4, as bishop to b6 doesn't really do anything. So okay, bishop to h6, and now we have queen to f7. Also queen g6, very nice. Divya decides to go for queen to f7. Knight g5, attacking the queen, and the question is, okay, do you trade here or do you go queen to g6? Both is fine. Queen to g6 may be a bit more precise, but okay, bishop captures on g5, bishop captures, and now pawn to f4, sort of stranding the bishop on g5, but this also means giving up the e4 square for the white knight and also opening up this diagonal for the light square bishop. So Bassem says, all right, thank you for the e4 square, goes knight e4. Now this knight, even though it can't go anywhere, even if it could, it wouldn't, as the d6 pawn would fall, so at least it has something to do. But okay, bishop to f5, and now bishop back to f6, or rather forward to f6, putting pressure on the knight. And it's a very interesting move. You can't really eliminate the knight and then capture the bishop, because captures would happen with check. But there was this interesting idea of going pawn to g4. And just kicking away the bishop or forcing a trade, because f captures on g3, rook to f3, pinning the bishop, and now if captures, captures. So it means opening up your position quite a lot, but it is necessary if you are to play this for a win. In the game, Bassem played bishop to f6, and now we have queen to g6, bishop captures on g7, queen captures, and now pawn to g4. And okay, what's the idea? The idea is that if f captures, then rook captures on g3, and no problems for white whatsoever. But here we have rook to c4. A very unpleasant move, putting pressure on that knight and just activating the rook. Now you have to worry about maybe rook f to c8, so it's not easy to find a move for white here. Bassem plays king to h2. Now the g-pawn is no longer pinned, so you are threatening to capture on f5, bishop to g6, and now rook b3. The b pawn is hanging, so rook b3 does seem like a move you should play, but it looks very passive, and you just have to admit that you're not better. Because if you look at this position, who's really attacking here? I don't think you look at this position and you're thinking, why white is having a great time here. No, it's black who's attacking here. So you should play rook to b3 and just try to defend. But Bassem tried to go for activity instead. He played rook to c3. He gave up the b4 pawn. Rook captures on b4, and now rook to c6. Okay, you're putting pressure on d6, you're putting pressure on a6, you might create a passed a pawn. So, it's not nothing. But here comes pawn to f3. Maybe including rook to d4 first would also go a long way. But okay, Divya is already down to 1 minute on the clock, and she still needs to make 8 more moves to reach time control. And I think that's the part of the reason for Bassem's next move. He probably tried to play on Divya's time. He should play queen to d2. And just hope to hold. You attack the rook. After the rook moves, you go for queen g5, and now you don't really have to worry about a lot of things. If you trade everything off, then okay, just captures, bishop captures, and you try to hold this endgame. Black's still better, but yeah, you can hold. But after knight to g3, there's something else here, and it's not easy to spot unless you can see some 6 moves ahead, which I'm sure you guys can, as you guys are amazing players. Feel free to pause the video and win the game for Divya while I give you a couple of seconds. Trading with knight captures on a5, rook captures on d6 is one way to go, although it doesn't really force a win. If you play rook captures on g4, which is what Divya did, now you really are forcing a win. And you can't really avoid capturing the rook. If you just play bishop captures on g6 and rook captures, okay, you admit that you missed rook g4, and second, your position is lost. There's not even a move that you can make here. It's a really, really bad position. The knight can come to c5 later on. You have to worry about knight d3. If the queen moves, knight d4 is possible in some lines. Rook is coming to h6, putting pressure on h3. The queen comes into the game. So this is dead lost in all of the lines. So after rook captures on g4, Bassem had to capture on g4. Now queen to h6 with check, and if the king goes back, then the idea is queen h3, and there's no defense. Queen, you will have to capture on f3, give up the queen, and that is it. So after queen h6 check, knight to h5, trying to be tricky here. Bishop captures on h5, and now queen to c1, trying to trade queens, but Divya avoids it very nicely with rook to f4. Okay, we have rook to c8 with check, king g7, rook to c7 with check, and now bishop to f7, blocking check while opening up a check to the white king. And here we have king to g3, with there being only one move that wins for Divya. And she's gaining that 30 seconds increment, so she racked it up to 1:30, but she still needs to make 2 more moves to reach time control, and these 2 are crucial. What do you play here? Only one way to win for black. Queen to g5, that is the move. You have to go after the g4 pawn, and now bishop to f5, defending the pawn, and this is now move 40. If you make it, you're winning. If you don't make it, you're not winning. And, well, if you make it, you also reach time control, so you no longer have to worry about losing on time. What do you play here? Believe it or not, it is knight to c5. The knight that was the most useless piece in the game now is used to win the game. You know, chess is sometimes funny like that. But yeah, knight c5, the only move that wins. Because if you, let's say you go rook captures on f5, which is also not a bad move. Then queen captures on g5, rook captures on king h4. Once the rook moves, you capture on b7, and all of a sudden it's white who's winning here. So that obviously will not do. After knight to c5, there's no move that white can make. Now you really have knight to d3, knight to e4, and pawn to h5. You just go after the white king, bishop to h5 if the rook moves. So there is nothing for Bassem here. He plays rook captures on c5, d captures on c5, and pawn to d6. He does found counterplay, and it's beautiful counterplay. It almost works except for one thing. Look at this. Bishop to h5, going after the g4 pawn. Rook to g1, bishop captures on g4, bishop captures on g4, rook captures on g4 with check. It was also a possibility to blunder the game if you play captures with the queen, then king h2 nicely skewers the black queen. So after bishop captures, rook captures with check, king captures on f3, and now rook captures on g1. Queen captures on g5, and rook captures on g5, and now Divya is up a full rook, but pawn to d7, and the rook and king are hopeless in stopping the passed pawn, unless they're not. I'm sure you guys see it. Of course, rook f5 check. This is what Divya played, and it was in this position on move 47 that Bassem Amin resigned, or rather Dr. Grandmaster Bassem Amin resigned the game, as there is nothing else to be done here. Yeah. Beautifully done. It almost worked, but you know, check. There is this little thing in chess called check, and now it's game over. King e4. Of course, you go rook f8. You stop the passed pawn, and that is it. So yeah, a wonderful game. I really think Bassem played that knight to g3 move because Divya was down to 1 minute on the clock. He tried to push for it, you know, as she really had to make a lot 8 more moves to reach time control. But she found all of them, and she took down a very strong grandmaster. This puts her on 2 out of 4, which is very nice. And like I said, one of the only 2 women playing in the open section. Hopefully, we see more of that in the tournaments to come. And these are the standings. If you guys missed the previous video, and also if you missed it, don't miss it because it was, you know, really awesome. These are the standings. So Parham leading the open section with 3.5. Then with 3 points, we have a lot of people: Abimanyu, Yuskan Erdomush, Mark Andrea Maurici, Simon Gumularc, Gukesh Domaraju, Arjun Irgaisi, Nodrbek Abdusatorov, Vincent Kamer Pregnananda, Richard Rapport, Matthias Blubaum, Nodrbek Yakuboev, and Nikita Vityugov. Those are with 3. And then with 2.5, even more people: Salih Salim, Ivan Cheparino, Robert Hovhannisyan, and so on and so on. But yeah, really strong tournament. Parham with excellent chances of reaching the candidates tournament. But you know, with chess he's playing, you know, there's no game that he plays that is not an absolute spectacle. You know, hopefully it will work out for him. But if not, we will get some excellent chess. So yeah, really hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Knightmaster Bishop, Christian Fisher, Carmen Polifronio, Austin Wheeler, and Ali Urukoglu for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions, such as this one, and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.